Good morning.
Good morning.
Hope everyone is well. It's hard to believe that just a couple weeks ago the sky was filled with smoke. Actually, all around us was filled with smoke. Such a joy to have some sun and crisp autumn air. I hope that everyone's getting a chance to enjoy that fully. It won't be here for long. And it'll be rain and winter and another kind of wonderful quality to the beautiful place that we live. So I'd like to talk today and next week about ethics. And I always try to pay attention to how many people show up for the ethics talks. Because I always have this suspicion that this isn't the sexiest part of Buddhism. But we've done pretty well today, so thank you all for being here. And I'm going to talk about ethics for a couple of reasons. One reason is that when COVID started in the beginning of this year, I started a series of talks called Freedom of. And I've been presenting some teachings about the way in which the paramitas, which is one way to organize a system or a way of thinking about Buddhist practice. The paramitas mean sometimes translated as the perfections, also can mean the crossing over to the shore of nirvana. That we've been talking about those, and we didn't start in the typical order. We started with patience because I felt like that's what was something we were all working with. Patience isn't just about kind of being able to hold on for a long time, but patience is about finding the freedom in difficult circumstances. Finding freedom within difficult circumstances. And from there, then COVID kept going, is keeping going, so it kept talking about this issue of freedom, of liberation, not as something which just is an outward state, but is an inward condition. And that we all have a deep and valuable freedom, which is present all the time. And so we've made our way around from patience to vigor, to meditation, to wisdom, to generosity, and now we're at ethics. And the next one is patience again. So actually, I'm giving a couple talks, and then there'll be important ceremony, which I'll talk about next. And then we have Segaki, and then the head student for this term, Kogen, will give a series of talks on the Heart Sutra. There'll be a Dharma combat ceremony. We'll have a celebration of the Buddha's enlightenment and closing of term, and that's going to take us up into December. And we'll likely all still be wearing masks, but at least we'll have some invigorating dharma to engage in through that period of time. So these two talks will be probably the last of these talks about freedom. So that's one reason I'm talking about freedom of ethics. The other reason is because in a couple of weeks, we will have a Jukai ceremony. Jukai is oftentimes people would describe it as being the ceremony in which people receive the precepts. Actually, the term Jukai is very interesting. Kai is usually translated as precept, but Ju, depending on how it's written, and it's written both ways, can mean to give the precepts, and that can also mean to receive the precepts. It's the same sound in Japanese, but it can have both meanings. And indeed, that's what that ceremony is about. That's what that ritual gate or that dharma gate is about. It's about giving and receiving precepts. And that you can't receive them without them being given, and you can't give them without them being received. That seems pretty simple. But this is central to our tradition. In this case, precepts, if we talk about it in the matrix of the perfections, we will call it sila, which usually is translated as ethics. It's one of the branches of practice. In the oldest ways that practice was organized, we talked about there being wisdom, about there being meditation, and about there being ethics. That those were the things which animated the path. So although we use the word precepts, people oftentimes think precepts is just like a list of rules, because that's the way that you've encountered them, right? If I say precept, you think it's like a list of rules that you agree to follow. But sila is more nuanced than that. The great ancestor Nagarjuna, in his commentaries on the perfection, says if a person may take up a code of practice, right, or they may not. But either way, if they are practicing sila, then that is the Buddhist path. Okay? So sila is a broader term than just a code of ethics. And in our tradition, it's particularly complicated because in our tradition, many hundreds of years ago, the traditional Buddhist precepts were left behind as rules, and they remained as an ethical practice. So when we use the word precept in the Soto Zen tradition, we're talking about ethics. We're not talking about rules. Okay? So Jukai, the kai, basically means sila. It means ethical living. And when we receive precepts, we receive a list. Okay? It looks like a list of rules, but it is a list of guideposts. It's a list of something which helps focus our intention on delving deeply into what is an ethical way of living. Not for the purposes of being good, right? Like I'm a good boy, because oftentimes that's our motivation, but for the purposes of liberation. Right? So sometimes we have to go through some stage of wanting to be a good boy or good girl, right? So it's not terrible. But we should turn our eye not towards the sense of, do I feel like I'm good or bad, but how is this liberating? How is it liberating for me, and how is it liberating for others? Because it should be both ways. So when we talk about Jukai, we talk about giving and receiving. This giving and receiving is exactly at the center of sila. We can say giving and receiving is sila, or it's the modality of sila. To wake up to a life which is given and received, not a life which is simply my own, as an independent, whatever I think I am independently. Everything is given and received. And so the precepts are given and received. And when we can accept it, when we can receive the precepts, we're also giving them. And we uncover this deep mutuality, which is at the basis of the practice of sila. At the beginning of Dogen Zenji's teachings on the precepts, he has a short writing called the Kyoju Kaimon, or the teachings on giving and receiving the precepts. And at the very beginning of that, he says the great precepts of the Buddhas are maintained carefully by the Buddhas. Buddhas give them to Buddhas. Ancestors transmit them from ancestors. And then he goes on. The great precepts of the Buddhas, the great liberation of sila, the great liberation of an ethical life is maintained carefully by the Buddhas. The Buddhas maintain this carefully. That's how they care for all beings. Maintaining those precepts is maintaining all beings, is caring for all beings. These Buddhist precepts are the way that the Buddhas care for us. Buddhas give them to Buddhas. Awakened beings give this ethical life to awakened beings. Right at the center of every being, there is a Buddha giving a life of freedom to a Buddha. Right there in your own belly, your own heart, your own mind. It's constantly unfolding. Buddhas giving the freedom of an ethical life to a Buddha. And ancestors transmit them from ancestors. That's how they appear to us today. There have been people who through the ages have taken up the practice of giving and receiving an ethical life, being bound to community. Not just saying, oh, I'm going to decide what's right and wrong, I'm going to do that. Although you need to decide what's right and wrong, you need the faculty of ethical deliberation, you need the inquiry about what is right to do, what is not right to do, but you don't do that in isolation. Ancestors transmit to ancestors is how it appears to us. It appears to us as an embedded being in a place, in a society, in a culture, in a community, where my ethical inquiry is completely interrelated with the beings that I share my life with. It's not just that, okay, there was somebody who got the precepts who gave it to someone who got the precepts who gave it to someone who got the precepts who gave it to someone who got the precepts. That's true. That's transmission. Right? That's how a lineage operates. But the lineage only really operates with all the people at each one of those generations giving and receiving the precepts to each other again and again and again and again and again. Again, embedded in their life, not escaping their life. I love that about ethical inquiry, or the ethical side of practice. It won't let you go abstract, which we do so easily, right? It's actually about when you're involved in the inquiry of maintaining the precepts, of maintaining the freedom of an ethical life. You come up with concrete encounters again and again and again and again and again. And they show up as your friends, and they show up as your enemies, and they show up as your family, and they show up as your students, and they show up as your teacher, and they show up in the grocery. They show up everywhere, right? And that's challenging and also liberating. I think there's a tendency for us to associate freedom, or the feeling of freedom, with things getting out of our way. You know, like when you're driving. I went to the coast with my wife yesterday. She said, I need to see the ocean. She's Japanese. She grew up very close to the ocean. And sometimes, especially if things at work are stressful and that kind of thing, she's like, I need to see the ocean. So we went to the ocean yesterday. It was really nice. But you know, it would make it nicer if all those people wouldn't be on the road. You know? And I associate freedom with the guy in front of me who's got this is so annoying. Let me kvetch a second here. Like a sports car, like really souped up sports car where they take the catalytic converter and stuff out of it so it stinks really bad. And then they drive like 63. Not slow enough that you can just get around them, but not fast enough that they go ahead of you and you don't have to smell their fumes the whole way, right? We just started laughing. It was such a joke. I would like stop the car, let them get way ahead, you know, because I didn't want to smell. And then I'd start driving again, you know, and then something would happen and there they would be in front of us again. I'm pretty sure it was Bodhisattva sent to help me practice some level of patience. But my point being here is that's so much how we associate freedom. If things would just get out of my way, that's when I feel free, all right? As if there was this clear field for unrestricted action of the subject being me. I don't know about your movie, but in my movie, I'm definitely the main character, right? So in that main character situation, everything being out of my way, this feels like freedom. Now, I'm not saying this is how we always feel about freedom or the only way that we consider it, but I would say that there is a tendency for us to associate freedom or liberation with that kind of feeling, like the problem is resolved, right, in one way or another. But there is no such me without other things, right? This is what we've been studying when we're studying the perfections. There is no me to carry out itself apart from the field in which the me is appearing. All the other things that appear in the field with me, if they're not there, there's no me. I wouldn't even know, how could I even be a me without there being other things? It takes other things for me to even have a sense of there being a me-ness here. I'm sharing life. And in that sharing life, I come to know myself. So although we have this kind of feeling, this kind of fantasy about if things would just get out of my way, that's where freedom would be. If we got rid of all the other things, there would be nothing to do. There would be no me to do that. In actuality, we are in a whole world of marvelous and mysterious things. A world full of marvelous and mysterious things. And when I say marvelous and mysterious, I don't mean it's just all covered in chocolate syrup, right? I mean, a lot of things are stinky and don't taste good. We have difficulty with, but they are marvelous and mysterious. And what I mean by marvelous and mysterious is they show up in this way which is beyond our ability to grasp. Ungraspable things are showing up again and again. I know a face of them, and the face I know of them is the face that shows up to me. But I can't grasp the entirety of them because all of those things which I encounter are also depending on all the other things in the world for them to be there. The ungraspable things that show up in my world are not things. Or we could say those things are not things. And then it starts sounding like Zen, right? So as we've been studying these, I've been coming back to this image. And the image that the great Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh refers to as the Dialectics of Prajna. And I believe he uses rose when he uses this image. But I prefer tree. That a tree is not a tree, therefore it is a tree. So no, I've been saying this for the past months, I'm probably getting sick of it. But if you think about that image again, if you look at a tree, you can very clearly encounter the phenomena of a tree. But the phenomena of that tree is made up of all kinds of non-tree things. It's made up of all kinds of things that are not what we would think of as being that tree. Like, for example, it's made up of my mind. The phenomena of that tree being there is not separate from my cognition of it. Now, I'm not saying that you just thought up a tree and that's why the tree appeared. That's a different argument which we could have, because I think that might be true actually, but that's not my point right now. is that even without going down a road of talking about is there a physical world out there or not, you can just say in a real practical sense, even if there totally is this thing called a tree that's out there, the only way that it becomes a phenomena in my world is through my cognition of it, right? For it to be a phenomena, I have to touch it in some way. So when I look at it, I see the tree, my mind is right there present in the seeing, right? There's an image in my head, right? Probably in my heart too. There's soil, there's light, there's water, there's bugs, there's wind. There's all of those kinds of physical things. There's love. How does a tree survive? In a human environment? Or in the environment where the trees just love the trees? So all of these things come into a tree being there. And in fact, everything is like that. Every phenomena is like that. I am not me, therefore I'm me. In the language of the Heart Sutra, we talk about this as the relationship between form and emptiness. Right? Form being phenomena. Things appear. We have glasses. Right? But form being emptiness is saying that the form doesn't just exist independently. The form exists because all the things around it, the glass exists because all the things around it also exist. And that's how it is that the glass can be here. This teaching is called a wisdom teaching, prajna. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that all liberation is defined by this. Right? There is real oppression of the outward kind. Humans inflict horrible things on each other and on other beings as well. So I'm not saying this because freedom should be only something which you can just bring about for yourself, or that it has nothing to do with the causes and conditions that you're in, or that any given being is in. In fact, it's completely related to the causes and conditions we're in. That's my point, is we are embedded in causes and conditions. But that outward forms of oppression, for example, or limitations of freedom, they also emerge and return to this more inward way of thinking about freedom. In what way do we enact that kind of limitation on the freedom of other beings? What has to arise in our heart to enact that and to keep it going? This is the part that Buddhism has traditionally been primarily concerned with. Working on the karma, working on the habit energy, working on the way in which we inflict on ourselves and others a lack of respect, a lack of freedom, a lack of respect for each other's agency and individuality. And so, as we explore the practice of ethics, don't look for the light that's somewhere off there in the sky. Okay? That's the point. The light here being the spiritual light, the part where we feel like filled with the word like it's like the parting of a veil in which the mystery doesn't have to be captured. You know, it's that place where we feel a sense of awe. We feel a sense of knowing something, although we haven't grasped something. It's like when you look out over the sea, you know, and the waves are coming in, and these waves are ancient, and you just know them, right? You just know them. And that curvature of the water that's always moving but also seems still. That's what I mean by light. But don't look for it far off in the sky. Don't think that it's something that rises above and is out there apart from the things that are down here on earth. You know, those terms for emptiness, the character in Chinese means sky. Right? The character for form usually means color. It's all these things which we can see because they have a color. They have like a tangibility. So in the Heart Sutra it says form is emptiness, emptiness is form. That's very important and rich teaching. One aspect of it is you can't be looking for this light in only the sky and not in the embodiment. The spiritual practice, this is why Sila is so important, is because it won't let us just float into the sky, but it asks us to find the light right here in the objects of our field of life. Finding the light is meeting the bright mirror of things. This is the giving and receiving. When we meet things, when we strive to meet the bright mirror of things, there is something given and received because that mirror is right here in us as well. We're looking for the place in which that mirror is giving and receiving. We're giving each other. And it gets obscured so easily. To be unskillful with meeting in that place is totally natural to us. Okay? But the ethical teachings, just like all the teachings, but the ethical teachings here are asking us to stay put, to stay facing each other, and to do it with as much integrity as we can, and to look for that reflection, to look for that light that is right there in the thing, not off in the sky somewhere, but right there in the thing. So when you're in a very difficult situation, ethics is telling us things like, don't be angry. Well, why not anger? Well, it isn't just because anger may cause some problem outwardly. It may upset someone or may scare someone, but also because anger obscures the reflection. I'm not saying that you should never be angry. I'm saying that the precept on anger is giving you a clue about how it is that a certain way of acting obscures our ability to be able to see the light right here in our meeting. Because that light is where the freedom is. That light is where the karmic patterns, the habit energies, no longer just turn and control our life, but something different can appear. In all their complexity and difficulty, the things of the world are inviting us to return to something that is primary. And in this, they're a great gift, the difficulties, a great gift. How do I return to something that's primary? Not trying to get the world leveraged to the way that I think will be best. And you might even get it there, but it won't stay there for very long. So that right in the midst of the ethical struggle, we find out where to put our foot. I know that many of you probably have very mixed feelings about our president contracting COVID-19. I want to invite you in all seriousness to look at your response very deeply and with a broad mind. I don't say this because I want to shame anyone into anything, feeling bad because you thought, well, he deserves it, or maybe he'll die, or I hope he dies, or whatever it is. I say because this is an opportunity, not an opportunity to come out on the right side, but an opportunity to look deeply into your own heart, to look into your own mind, to look at our own capacity for brutality, our own capacity for wishing ill of others, and feeling what is the karmic pattern that is there. That will be different for everyone. But my encouragement would be, if you don't feel, if you can't see, if you can't smell, if you can't intuit the lessening of a load and the brightness of that mirror of mutuality, it's getting obscured by something. What is obscuring it? What will you do with that? Any questions or comments? And people who are on the monitor or on the online, we have a monitor today. So if your camera is on, people in the hall can see you, including me. And you can just speak up if you'd like to ask a question. You just unmute yourself and jump in. And people who are outside, if you'd like to ask a question, we have a mic here. So if people can come here to the threshold of the door, then the Jisha can point this mic at you, and that picks it up. And people in the hall, if you just gasho, then he can point the mic at you, and you can ask a question. It worked. I made my papers smaller a few months ago, so that I wouldn't talk for 45 minutes straight. But it took a few weeks. Now I can do half hour.
Hey Joe.
Hey.
So I guess what I'm feeling when I watch current events is a lot of bewilderment. That this. It's like watching. It feels like watching a series that maybe jumped the shark 2 seasons ago, and I don't understand why I'm still watching.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have things to say about sila when you're trying to engage with something that just seems kind of ridiculous on that level, or just kind of like it just seems it's so far-fetched that it's like, whoa, I don't even feel indignant about this anymore.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, I have 2 thoughts. One thought is that most of the ethical practice is right here. It's just like, who do you meet today? What do you do today? In the embeddedness of your life. And when the spectacle gets quite noisy, one of the real difficulties of that is it's so easy for the spectacle to pull us out of the actuality of our day-to-day living. And just from where I sit, my perspective on one of the real tragedies that's happening in our society right now is the spectacle is at such a fever pitch that it's pulling people out of the embedded quality of their ethical living. And people kind of like, oh, well, screw it. And then you get on Facebook or something, and then it's just like the end of it. It's like you just write something and send it off. And it just feeds on each other. Kind of an unfiltered regurgitation of our karmic conditioning. So that's the first thing, is I try to watch that in myself and make sure that I don't use those activities out there to undermine my own ethical choices. And someone, I'm not going to hide my politics in this. Somebody who is so aggravating as Trump, one of the things that's so aggravating about him is he has completely captured the attention of everyone. And people are just hucking their ethics away to kind of like fire shots at him. And that seems like such a problem, So that's one thing. I would say the other thing is that ethics, like I would say everything that really matters, takes a huge amount of commitment and resolve to keep going, and it takes nothing for it to shatter. There's a story, one of the stories that Nagarjuna tells about ethical living is about a fellow who is making all these offerings to this god. He makes all these offerings to this god, and he wants to have a good life. He's a very poor farmer or something, and he wants to have a good life, and so he makes all these offerings. And finally the god hears his prayers and gives him this vase, right? And no matter whatever he thinks he wants his life to become, it just happens once he has this vase. It's called the Vase of Virtue. And so at one point in the story, someone comes and asks him about how he became so successful, even though he started out so impoverished. And he says, oh, I have this vase which the god gave me, and it's so great, and all these great things are coming out of the vase. And he gets so excited that he gets he gets up and he dances on the rim of the vase, and the vase breaks, and then he loses everything. And the reason Nagarjuna tells this story is he says, this is what it's like. You try really hard. This is kind of a metaphor from another time, but he's like, you try really hard to make this thing happen, and you actually receive the prize, right? And it brings all kinds of wonderful things into your life. He says this is how sila is. It brings all kinds of wonderful things into your life. But one moment of objectifying, and the whole thing is gone. And so this is the quality of the quality of our individual ethics, but it's also the quality of our collective ethics. And so for us to live in a life, to live in a world that has righteousness at its base, there is no other way than for us to live out the righteousness. And we don't do it and then we're done. It can go away in a moment. So for me, the spectacle makes me want to double down on it. It doesn't mean it's easy to make decisions about whether I rob a bank or not. Right? That's a little bit of hyperbole, but, so for example, if the monetary system is so rigged, right, that's going to influence my ethical thinking. I don't just say, well, it's wrong, money is sacrosanct, and so I'm going to protect that at all costs because the precept says do not steal. What do I mean by steal? Is hoarding property itself theft? I would say yes. And so what is my ethical reaction to that? I have to stay alive and engaged in that process. And it at some point, it will get very gnarly. It's mildly gnarly now. I'm a child of the 80s. Gnarly. It's kind of gnarly now, but it ain't that gnarly compared to where it has been and where it could go. And I think that's the point where people who are taking seriously their day-to-day ethical actions and their ethical ways of holding their heart will become the jewels of what emerges from there. Mm.
In regards to the current things ailing our acting president, there has been a lot that has been coming up. But I've been having a lot of discussions about that with my partner, and he is kind of firmly rooted in the stance that he deserves it, and it's justified, and it's irony, and it's like all these things. And I'm faced with that and trying to feel for that place, because there's some part of me that feels drawn into what he's saying. I don't necessarily, the more I look inside, the more I find I don't disagree, but at the same time, I feel like in context to that, I hold this idea that, I try to hold on to the idea of emptiness, of the fact that, I don't know, all these, like, I try to hold on to the fact that he is still a human being. That he is still a human being that has been conditioned and formed and changed by the same society that I have been conditioned and formed and changed by. Different aspects, different sides of the picture, but at the end of the day, we share that humanity. And I was wondering if you could comment on that and kind of, I don't know, help me find it, help me investigate that a little bit more.
Yeah. So one thing I would say, in the subtlety of this, is there are many layers of our being, right? So there's one layer of our being where we may feel like, oh yeah, jerk deserves it, didn't wear a mask, like who would have thought, So there's that layer that may be part of our being. The question ethically is, what layer of my being am I going to rely? What layer of my being am I going to rely on? And that's ethical investigation. And that doesn't mean that it needs to be that we need to inflict our judgment upon others, especially when we can feel those different layers of our own being. We can hear that in another person. And we can say, yeah, I understand how people feel that way. What am I going to rely on? Where am I going to speak from? Where am I going to act from? What am I going to believe in? And we have to ask those different layers of our being that question. Which one allows the reflection? And that doesn't always mean pitching towards the easiest thing. It doesn't mean always being the softest, always being the most forgiving, always being the most whatever. It can mean, face to face. Like, no. That oftentimes is the most ethical thing, is to say no. And so I would just encourage you in that way to feel the complexity within your own being. This is one of the primary ways that we sidestep ethical thinking, is we try to move from complexity to reduce the sense of complexity so that we can just be right and be done with it. Right? Or be wrong. Some of us are fine being wrong. Oh, I'm wrong. Okay, good. I'm wrong now. I can just be wrong. So to introduce the encounter with the complexity, and then as we encounter the complexity, then to feel, okay, what actually is reliable here? What is more freeing? And so for me, for example, with President Trump getting COVID, one of the things that's really, I feel like, is important for me to recognize is I didn't have anything to do with it in a very direct sense, and what I think about it's not going to change the whole situation a lot, right? So what am I actually thinking about ethically? What is my ethical conundrum here? The ethical conundrum is, how am I going to hold it in my heart? Am I going to hold ill will? Am I going to hope for somebody to suffer? I'm going to have a pretty good justification for that. Is my feeling. And I question that. As we talk about this at the breakfast table sometimes, or after breakfast, we're having tea. If Trump gets through this without any problems, that's also going to have some bad consequences, I think. Again, raise the flag higher, right? It's like, see, it wasn't that big a deal in the first place. Right? So my mind goes there, and I see that part too. But if I start to wish someone ill will, then there's something that doesn't feel so solid to me, So I'm watching it. I invite you to continue watching it too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Probably have time for one more if anybody's game.
Hey, Joe.
Hi.
Hey, Joe.
Hi.
I was over at the Zendo yesterday with Genjo, and I was saying to him, I said, I'm trying not, as a good Buddhist, not to hate Trump too much and hope he really suffers. And he said something to me, which I really turned me around. Mm-hmm. He said, I hope he gets compassion for people from this.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way to think of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We all have our own way of suffering. So to hope for that to result in more compassion and understanding, I think that's very reliable. Yeah.
Hey, Joe?
Hi.
I have a question. Mm-hmm. So let's see if I can formulate this. So practicing sila individually and meeting individuals, that seems pretty straightforward, and I can excavate that. I struggle with how to meet the specter of institutions. So that just seems like in the ether to me, because in this country we are meeting such unethical, historical, entrenched, everything. And how to meet that is not. I mean, we can do lip service to it being met on an individual basis, but that's that's not where the power and the control is. So how does an individual meet institutional unethical?
Yeah. We have to build communities. We have to build the culture of ethics. And it's not like this specter started a few years ago or even a century ago. This is part of the law of humanity. And there have been times of more and times of less ethical consideration on the institutional scale. And so we have our unique challenges with that, and I don't think there is any way around building the institutions, building the communities, building the culture that holds sacred values as central to a human life. And if we can't do that, then the destruction that we deliver on ourselves will be necessary. Because it can't just stay in the rut. So we may fight as hard as we can to enact that ethical life with all the gusto that we've got, and we might fail in actually turning the world around. But that's not the point. It's not the point. Saving the world isn't the point. Yeah. So, it's modest, what we're doing here at Budai Temple, but important. Doesn't mean that this institution is perfect. It doesn't mean there's nothing for us to face in this institution. There is. But when we look for that illumination in each other, we start to build a community and a culture of mutual responsiveness and responsibility and care. And if you talk with people outside of your bubble, most people have that to some measure, and they hunger for more of it. And the people who you would think, I don't, I'm not going to like them, I'm not going to agree with them, we don't have nothing in common, da 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 da. They also have a measure of that, and they hunger for it, and they hunger for more. That's been my experience. And so I have a kind of a trust that actually we're wired to want this kind of freedom. It's in the hearts of our being. So I don't think it's just when the people I agree with can rule the world, everything will be fine. I think actually there's something that has to get activated in a more primary sense, and no amount of trying to solve it on the institutional level alone will solve the problem. We need the institutional level to be in dialogue with or in responsiveness with the level of the individual and of the culture. But that's largely broken right now, with mass institutions anyway. And I guess the last thing I would say is that our sorrow over the diminishment of our collective lives because of our inability to really rise to the occasion in an ethical way collectively, that sorrow is deeply important. That if we can't stay connected to the grief and sorrow that is there as we see the missteps of our species, then we come out with unwieldy responses, which may set a fire that's helpful in a way, but that we need that grief and sorrow to find our way forward with our feet on the ground.